My name is Bernie Maduz, and I'm from Burleson, Texas. What you're looking at is a 1944 Willys Jeep, commonly called an MB. These Jeeps were made by two different manufacturers. One of them was Ford, and the other one was Willys. The Fords were called GPWs, the Willys were MBs. This particular Jeep has got a Ford engine in it, but it's a Willys Jeep because the parts were interchangeable between the Fords and the Willys. There were approximately 650,000 of these made, and if I remember right, the Fords were like 270,000 of those that were made. They started out production in 1940. The first ones were sent over to Britain for Lend-Lease, and they were called Peeps by the British. But when it came back to the States, they called it a Jeep, taken from the Popeye cartoon series that the veterans started calling them Jeeps, and that's the name that stuck with it. This has got an 80-inch wheelbase, I believe it is. It was used in all theaters of operation, whether the Australians used it, the Brits used it, the French used it, everybody, all the Allies used this particular vehicle. It was a general purpose vehicle. It has a flathead engine. I think they called it the Go Devil engine. Ford had to change their engines from a tractor engine to the Go Devil engine to make it work and be all interchangeable. It's really a vehicle that has stood the test of time. There's some later versions made for the Korean War and also for the Vietnam War, but this one it was used as an ambulance. It was used to lay wire for telephone poles, you name it, and it did the job for the troops. It's a four-cylinder flathead engine. I think it's 35 horsepower.
Wow.
Three-speed transmission in reverse. It's also a four-wheel drive. It has a gear in here where you could disengage it. At top speed without four-wheel drive was 65 miles an hour. But in four-wheel drive, top speed was about 35 or 40. But it has a mixture of parts on it. It's got Ford parts and it's got Willys parts. But it was designed to be that way. And as a result, there's millions of parts still out there. The French got a bunch of these after the war. In fact, it flooded the market. This particular unit was sent over to France at some point in time. It was made in '44, so it left and probably got to France right after, as the war was ending, but it wound up in the French Army's hands, and they sent it to Vietnam when they were in charge of Vietnam. And then when the American troops arrived in Vietnam, they decided to get rid of all the old equipment that was there, and it was sold off to the Filipino group. What we're looking at is the interior of the Jeep. For a young person who just joined the Army, if he didn't know how to drive the Jeep, the instructions are here on the data plate. It tells you when the Jeep was made, it tells you how to shift the gears, and it also, this one, since it came out of France, has got a French artillery data plate on it. It was revised in August of '55, and it belonged to the 251st French Artillery Unit. This is a gun carrier for a carbine. However, you could put an M1 Garand in it, but most of them use the M1 carbine. And when you move on back here, the radio was made by Crosley in 1944. This power pack, which was used to power the radio, was made in April of 1945. And in it, of course, it has many got to remember these are tubes now. So it had spare tubes. And it had a range of about 5 to 8 miles when you would set it up, because it could be made into a backpack. You have a canvas backpack, or you could make a field radio out of it, and it has a hand-driven generator to make it work, to give you the power. But not all of this was standard in all Jeeps, but many of them had it for field communications.